I'm your cult boyfriend. We're talking about Ferris Bueller's Day Off, a titan, a behemoth, a gladiator, a warrior of a film, a massive movie within the teen art canon. One of the most beloved, cherished, worshipped, and fondly remembered teen films of all time. For good reason, it's a very fun movie, and it actually has quite a lot to say about angst and about freedom, about nonconformity, about youth. Ferris Bueller's Day Off is extremely good, directed by John Hughes, who possibly is the most significant figure in all of teen films. He's the godfather of the genre. When it comes to John Hughes movies, I do probably like John Hughes directed films. I probably do think that 16 Candles and The Breakfast Club are both better than Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but they're all pretty close. Those three are pretty close. Weird Science, we can we can keep that over there. It's not that great, but it's definitely a fun watch. Um, his three masterworks, directorial masterworks within the genre are 16 Candles, The Breakfast Club, and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I think the best thing he was ever a part of was Pretty in Pink, which he wrote. And Howard Deutsch, the director of Pretty in Pink, has said that the film was primarily John's vision, so sometimes I just like to give John full credit on that one. Pretty in Pink, I think, is the best from the Hughes catalog overall. But we're just talking about projects he truly, authentically directed. Ferris Bueller's Day Off is another masterwork. Right up there with 16 Candles in the Breakfast Club, just slightly lower for me. It's just a matter of personal preference. Ferris Bueller is pretty interesting as well when we're talking about Hughes's career, especially within the genre, the art form teen films, which he pioneered. It's his final one. It's the last teen film he ever directed. A lot of people say that Ferris Bueller's Day Off is about. I don't think a lot of people say this. I just made that up. I say this, and I've seen at least one or two other people say it. I don't know if it's a widespread kind of view or reading of the film, but it's one that I definitely have, and I think you should have it too. Ferris Bueller's Day Off is about whereas 16 Candles and The Breakfast Club, those were about the angst of being a teenager, the angst of high school itself, the angst of being introduced to social hierarchies and introduced to feelings such as true, tender, all-encompassing, and devastating love. It was about the angst of youth, of being a teenage kid. Ferris Bueller's Day Off has some of those things, but what Ferris Bueller's Day Off is about is the angst of leaving school. 16 Candles was about the angst of high school. Ferris Bueller's Day Off is about the angst of leaving high school. And likewise, since it's John Hughes's final teen film, he's also leaving high school. He's also graduating high school. So there is a cool kind of layer to the film, like immediately, where John Hughes is also dealing with the angst of leaving the high school frameworks, just like Ferris is and just like Cameron is. It's a clever, fun, zany, and I think occasionally anarchic kind of comedy. But comedies in the world of John Hughes are deeply touching. Just beneath the surface, there are all of these kinds of deeply emotional, ruminative, and penetrating themes, like just below the surface of Ferris Bueller. It's such a good film. Firstly, Ferris is a legendary teen character. Matthew Broderick clearly was born to play this role. Uh, just did it so well, so well. One of the most legendary teen characters of all time, a hero for all time. Uh, a figure who seems nearly divine, more of a physical symbol, like he's more symbolic than he is physical. And he's symbolic of freedom. He's symbolic of angst itself, writ large, on a parade float, being celebrated, championed, and hunted by authority figures. Cameron, played by Alan Ruck, Okay, I think they're all legendary teen characters. Our three main ones here. Ferris is played by Matthew Broderick, Cameron played by Alan Ruck, and certainly Sloane played by Mia Sara. Mia Sara. Uh, she's not real, right? Like no one's that beautiful, am I right? That's impossible. Mia Sara, you don't exist. You don't exist. There's no human being on the planet that's as beautiful as Mia Sara. My brain would explode if that were truly the case. She was phenomenal in the film. All three were. And we often feel like we're the fourth member of this trio because Ferris is involving us directly in the narrative, in the action. He's constantly looking at us, at the audience, at you, at me. We're in this group. It just furthers the deification of Ferris in a beautifully, purely cinematic way because nothing can limit this kid. This kid has no restrictions, no limitations. Not even celluloid itself, not even film itself, because he seems to dominate everything about entire cinematic narrative systems. He breaks the fourth wall constantly. He's not limited by any sort of wall. No walls exist, and this is entirely a deliberate, poetic, and comedic choice, a brilliant choice from John Hughes. And I think all three are legendary. Ferris is legendary in his own right because I think he represents a sort of anarchism, a sort of wild freedom, um, for teenagers everywhere. But I think the three of them together, like this is, I would venture to say John Hughes's best composed film. There's complicated composition. There's interesting tableau. There's a sensitive sort of symmetry that he populates his film with visually, and there's a cool kind of rhythmic quality to the editing of the film, which John Hughes did edit. You know, like he edited this film as well. He's very, very talented. And this film, it's truly masterful. There's so much confidence behind the camera, and there's so much warmth and a beautifully constructed sense of tenderness, especially between these three, because it's such a wild comedy. It's such an anarchic comedy. It's such a cartoonish comedy that it is difficult to take these characters seriously in a large way, which I say like that not to criticize the characters at all, but to actually like deify them. I think that these characters are deified, that they become like so much larger than their archetypal definitions and limitations. It's not even about transcending archetypal limitations. It's about just deifying high school kids. Because with 16 Candles, right, John Hughes, through Molly Ringwald and through the Molly trilogy, which was, 16 Candles, Breakfast Club, and Pretty in Pink, through his muse Molly and his other muse, Anthony Michael Hall, he was giving these invisible kids, like, spotlight. In 16 Candles, it was about giving the invisible girl that all high schools come overwhelmingly full of. High schools are overwhelmingly comprised of girls who feel they are invisible. And with 16 Candles, he gave invisible girls their cinematic moment, like their cinematic Prince Charming, their wish fulfillments in a large way, or at least let them engage with their problems on the big screen, no matter how large or small, quaint or melodramatic. He allowed he gave invisible girls a chance to interact with the meanings of their own lives. Whereas Bueller's Day Off, he's doing something extremely radical, in my opinion. He's taking teenage archetypes that he basically invented or at the very least popularized, and he's deifying them. He's making gods out of them. He's making them into actual symbols that could have some sort of actual like visible effect on the viewer. People aspire to be like Ferris. People aspire to be like Sloane. People aspire to have this kind of perfectly balanced, mischievous trio of Ferris, Cameron, and Sloane. When we see Ferris on a parade float, lip syncing wildly, manically, and passionately, and recklessly to Twist and Shout, we're seeing the pure rebellion The universal teenage character, championed and adored. We're seeing the deification of the teenage troublemaker. We're seeing something phenomenal occur. Yeah, I honestly can't get over how picture perfect, how flawless the three of them look together, and how much unique power each character has. Cameron is such a neurotic, such a depressed, such a neglected character. Comes across in a lot of the script because they're both missing school. Cameron's actually sick with depression, but no one talks about Cameron being gone. Everyone's concerned about Ferris, and Cameron's father doesn't notice him at all. He likes his sports car, his luxury vehicle, more than he likes his son. In fact, he never notices his son. And there's this huge emotional moment, kind of back to back, actually. Like, Cameron loses his mind over the car, and then you think he's like trying to kill himself by drowning in the pool, but he's just making fun of Ferris at the end of the day. But it's also about testing Ferris as well, and we see that Ferris is truly, truly dedicated and feels so worried about Cameron. And Ferris's whole motivation for going on such a wild day was because for Cameron and Ferris, high school's ending. And Ferris knows that this is the end of something pretty big. Responsibility is on the way, and also he knows that he and Cameron are going to lose touch, as so often happens with high school friends. He knows they're going to lose touch, and this was mostly a day, and I believe him in a sort of selfless way for Cameron. And I think the heart of the movie, Ferris and Sloane treat Cameron, this damaged cinematic archetype that is representative of a whole fleet of sad, dispossessed, disenchanted, and neglected teenagers. I mean, and how do we reach this point of heroism within Cameron? How do we reach the point of deification within Cameron? We reach it through destruction. That's why I think there's such an anarchist edge to this movie, because Cameron's true liberation comes when he destroys the car. The Ferrari comes when he destroys it. And Ferris offers to take the blame. But Cameron, no, he's ready for it. Because part of being an anarchist, part of being a purely free and wild and reckless teenager, part of being the deified version of that is anticipating penalty with a smile, with confidence, and with justification, like for your massive rejection. I love that he destroys like a token, an artifact um, of wealth that belonged to his father, that his father obviously cared for way more than he cared for Cameron, his son, or his wife, which Cameron says eventually as well. When Sloane and Ferris are talking about marrying, and Cameron's like, "Well, no, look at my parents. My dad loves a car. He hates his wife." That's such a liberating feeling. And Cameron is truly heroic and truly deified in that moment because he can't wait, because that means his father will have to deal with him. His father will have to notice him, will have to acknowledge that he has a son. I think that's really cool. There are a lot of great moments with Cameron, like right before he destroys the car. Sloane's like, "Hey, Cameron, did you? I bet you did. You saw me change, didn't you? You were looking at me. I thought you were catatonic." And Cameron does this so goofy, so like teenage boy, naive, giggly little smile at her, and it's so pure. Moments like that are so pure, and Sloane is like so caring throughout the whole movie when it comes to Cameron. Both Ferris and Sloane are incredibly caring of Cameron. And Sloane is deified from the get-go because Sloane is one of the most beautiful women that's ever existed. Like, she's ethereal, she's untouchable, and she's wild too. She's so smart and funny, and completely in on every single gag, every single scheme. You know, I think my favorite Sloane moment in the whole movie is when they're in traffic in the city, and she looks over and they see Ferris's dad in the car beside them. So Ferris and Cameron duck down into the floorboards, and like she's putting on her glasses and like slightly like fucking with Ferris's dad. And they're like, "What's he doing?" And she's like, "Oh, he's touching himself and making obscene hand gestures. He's licking the window and making obscene hand gestures at me." Like it's actually very funny. I love them at the art museum. That's where it gets beautifully sensitive with its symmetry. Right, so Sloane is like a deified version of like the the teenage heartthrob in a pretty large way, and it's like these two archetypes of the teen film genre uh, made deified in manifest within Ferris Bueller, making the normal depressed, neurotic, and sad character within like all of us, making that character deified, bringing that character up, elevating that character to a place of great esteem and true power. Sloane still has one more year of high school to go through, which I think is actually comforting, like subtly comforting for the viewer, because that Ferris and Cameron are leaving, but Sloane's still there. There's still a true believer. There is still a true icon of youthful expression, of youthful beauty, and of youthful anarchy. Sloane is extremely heroic and inspiring. That's so cool, you know? And I've seen a lot of analysis. There's just a lot of analysis of Ferris Bueller out there already. And most of them are terrible, but some of them are fun. They'll talk about how Cameron is the id to Ferris's ego, which I think is a valid point to bring up. But so many different forms of analysis or so many different readings of Ferris Bueller conveniently, I think, marginalize Sloane, and they focus primarily on Cameron and Ferris. I think that this film would fall apart if it wasn't the three of them. There's something so powerful about these three, you know, because I never even they look so good together, but they also, I don't know, they just look deified. Like they don't look kind of real, right? They look perfect, and I kind of love that. It's I think a deeply renegade kind of teen movie that does not have conformity as any part of its arc, as any part of its messaging. It's all about getting away with it. It's all about getting away with freedom. Youth is ultimately a constant battle to get away with being youthful. Youths are like the only the only groups of people who have to constantly justify their own existence, their own modes of expression, because authority figures are constantly trying to limit their expressions. And Ferris Bueller champions those expressions and deifies them. He does more than champion them. He makes them biblical, divine, prophetic, revelatory. And I love that so much. I think it's a wonderfully put together film. And from what I've read, it is a little sad John didn't seem, he definitely wanted to make the movie, but he couldn't form a very good bond with these actors. Like he had a very good bond with Molly Ringwald and Anthony Michael Hall, uh, with Ali Sheedy, with the originals. He couldn't really form a good bond with these kids, with Matthew Allen and Mia. He couldn't really do it. I, he was kind of an insecure, isolated sort of artistic individual. Yeah, Ferris Bueller is pretty interesting because we don't have like the usual players, the usual suspects aren't here. This isn't your normal repertoire of actors for John Hughes. It's different. It's different, and there is something that does feel strikingly different about Ferris Bueller. But I think that adds to the film. There is this foreign unknown variable within Ferris Bueller that not only keeps the comedy unexpected and anarchic, but keeps the emotions and the sensitivities raw and constantly provocative. I think all in all, it is a masterful movie. And I think it's done a lot of good, right? I think it's inspired kids to do a lot of good mischief, and I think that's a great kind of teen movie. And I do admire that it's a teen movie that has no time to meditate about conformity. It's a film dedicated to freedom. However pointless it may seem, the feeling of freedom can never be equaled, can never be matched. Ferris Bueller singing on that parade float is one of the defining moments of teen cinema, and I think one of the most legendary moments in all of the '80s film canon. Ferris Bueller, possibly one of the greatest film heroes of all time. If I were to be honest with you, he'd certainly be recognized as such. It's a great film, and these are just some of my thoughts about it. You're still here? It's over. The video's over. Go home. Go home.